Welcome to our deep dive into the financial health of Bangor, Maine.
Bangor, Maine.
You've given us their comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2023.
Oh, yeah.
And let me tell you, this thing is a gold mine of information.
It really is. You know, these reports can seem pretty dry at first glance.
Absolutely.
But they really offer a fascinating glimpse into a city's priorities and challenges and their vision for the future.
It's true. It's like we get to peek behind the curtain at City Hall.
Exactly.
We're going to unearth some fascinating facts about Bangor, analyze trends.
I love that unearthing facts.
And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a much better understanding of how cities manage their money.
Yeah, and while Bangor might seem like a small city on the map, it's up in Maine, on the Penobscot River, known for its history, Stephen King, and wait for this, a city-run golf course.
A city-run golf course.
The report shows they're making some significant moves.
That's not something you hear every day.
Right.
I'm already intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's part of a larger trend that we see in the report.
Okay.
Bangor is more hands-on with its economy than you might expect.
Interesting.
They're not just collecting taxes. They're running businesses like the airport parking, even the Cross Insurance Center arena.
Wow.
It's like they have a mini portfolio of businesses within the city government.
That's fascinating. It seems like they're taking a really active role in shaping their local economy.
Yeah.
And speaking of being active, the report shows that Bangor invested heavily in 2023.
They did.
They put $10.7 million into capital projects, another $7.9 million into school facilities,
Wow.
and $3.1 million to replace things like equipment and vehicles.
Yes, and that $7.9 million school investment is particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Bangor's population has been growing steadily, and this investment suggests that they're anticipating even more families moving in.
Yeah.
They're putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to education.
That's a great point. It seems like they're preparing for the future, not just reacting to the present.
Absolutely.
So we've got this city investing in schools, running a golf course, and managing an airport. It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
How can we start making sense of all these different moving parts?
Well, the report breaks down city finances into two main categories.
Right.
Governmental activities and business-type activities.
Okay.
It's like viewing a house.
Okay.
Governmental activities cover those essential services. Think of it like the foundation of the house.
This foundation.
Yeah, things like police, fire, schools. Business-type activities are more like adding those extra rooms or a finished basement.
I like that analogy.
They're more entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
The airport or that golf course we talked about.
So governmental activities are the essentials, the must-haves.
Right.
And the business-type activities are more like, hey, let's try this and see if it works.
Exactly. And this distinction is important because it helps us understand how the city is structured financially.
Sure.
Governmental activities rely heavily on taxes and funding from the state or federal government. Think of it like your paycheck. Business-type activities, on the other hand, are often self-supporting, generating revenue through fees and charges.
So it's like having a side hustle.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together.
Correct.
We've got the essentials, the side hustles, and this big picture of investments. Now let's talk about the actual financial statements.
Okay.
This is where some people might get intimidated, but you're going to walk us through it, right?
Of course. The report uses two types of financial statements, government-wide and fund statements.
Okay.
Don't let the jargon scare you.
All right.
The government-wide statements give you a panoramic view of the city's finances.
Okay.
It's like looking at a map of the entire city.
Okay.
But to understand the details of each neighborhood, you'd zoom in on specific areas, right?
Right.
Well, the fund statements are those zoomed-in views breaking down the finances into specific funds.
So it's like having a map and then a guidebook that tells you more about each specific location.
Exactly.
That makes sense. And how would someone like me or you actually use these statements?
Well, it depends on what you're interested in. Let's say you're involved in education funding.
Okay.
You'd dive deep into the governmental activity section and those funds related to schools. If you're curious about the airport's performance, you'd head straight for the business-type activities and the airport fund.
Okay.
The report is organized to allow for that kind of focused analysis.
So whether you're prepping for a meeting or doing research or just curious, This report can be a valuable resource.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about the overall spending either.
Right.
The report breaks down those specific investments, right?
That's right. The level of detail in these reports can really surprise people.
Yeah.
It's not just a big lump sum for infrastructure.
Right.
They break down exactly what they invested in.
For example, they put $1.1 million into replacing public transportation vehicles and another $1.1 million to build a new transit hub.
Wow.
They even spent $522,000 on streets and sidewalks.
This tells us a couple of things.
Yeah.
First, Bangor is serious about its public transit system. They're not just patching things up. They're investing in a modern, efficient system.
Yeah.
Second, it shows they're paying attention to the details that matter to residents.
Right.
Safe streets and reliable transportation are essential for a city to function well.
That's true. And while $522,000 for streets might seem like a lot,
Yeah.
it pales in comparison to the $7.9 million for school facilities.
Right.
What does that tell you?
It's not just about the dollar amounts, it's about the ratio. Spending almost 15 times more on schools than streets might suggest that Bangor has a younger population.
Okay.
Or they're anticipating significant growth in that younger demographic. It's like looking at a family budget where they spend their money reveals their priorities.
So we've got this picture of Bangor investing in its future, managing a diverse set of activities, and really getting involved in its economy.
Yes.
Pretty impressive for a small city, right?
It is. And that's just scratching the surface. We haven't even gotten to the details of their financial strategies or the insights hidden in the notes to the financial statements. There's so much more to explore.
Well, hold on, because we're just getting started. We'll be back in part 2 to dive even deeper into Bangor's financial story.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Bangor, Maine's FY 2023 financials.
Okay.
In part 1, we saw this isn't just some sleepy little town.
Yeah.
Bangor is making big investments and taking an active role in their local economy. Now, let's take a closer look at how they manage all that money.
Okay, so in part 1, we talked about the two main sides of their finances.
Yes.
The essential services
Right.
and those more entrepreneurial business-type activities.
Exactly.
We're sticking with the essential services for now, right?
Exactly. We're going to zoom in on the governmental activities, the core services that keep a city running.
Okay.
Remember we talked about how these are funded mostly through taxes?
Like our paychecks?
Like your paycheck?
Yeah.
No, just like you wouldn't dump your whole paycheck into one giant account.
Oh, no.
Cities don't manage their money that way either.
Right. I've got checking savings. Maybe a separate account for vacation funds.
Right.
Cities must have something similar.
They do. They use something called funds.
Okay.
Each fund is like a separate account with specific rules about what money can come in and what it can be spent on. Think of it like labeling your envelopes.
Yeah.
For rent groceries, fund money.
Okay.
It keeps everything organized and it helps ensure accountability.
So instead of one giant pot of money, they have all these different buckets, each with a label and a purpose.
Yeah.
What kind of funds are we talking about here?
Well, the report lists a whole bunch. There's the general fund, the capital projects fund, even an ARPA fund to track those federal pandemic relief dollars.
Yeah.
It's a reminder of just how much a city government is responsible for.
Absolutely.
From keeping the streets clean to responding to emergencies to planning for the future.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Let's start with the one you called the heart of the budget, the general fund.
Yeah.
What exactly does that cover?
The general fund is like the city's checking account.
Oh.
It pays for the day-to-day operations that keep everything running smoothly. Police and fire services, public works, parks and recreation, even the salaries for city council members. All that comes out of the general fund.
Okay, so that's the money for keeping the lights on and the city functioning.
Right.
What about big long-term projects? Where does the money for that come from?
That's where the capital projects fund comes in. Think of this as the city's savings account.
Okay.
For those big-ticket items, building new schools, fixing bridges, buying fire trucks, things that have a long lifespan and benefit the community for years to come.
Makes sense. And speaking of big-ticket items, the report mentions Bangor has $30.3 million committed to upgrading their sewer system.
That's a lot of...
That's a lot of,
It is. They've also got $13.9 million earmarked for improvements at the airport.
Wow.
And another $3.4 million for building upgrades. These projects don't happen overnight, and this shows us Bangor is planning and committing funds years in advance.
It's like putting money aside for a down payment on a house, but instead of a house, it's a new sewer system or airport upgrades.
Yeah.
They're thinking long-term, which is smart. Now, what about that ARPA fund? Wasn't that money meant to help cities recover from the pandemic?
Exactly. Those ARPA funds were a lifeline for many cities, providing an infusion of cash to deal with the economic fallout of COVID-19.
Right.
It's like that friend who spots you some cash when you're in a tight spot.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
Bangor got this extra money, but they couldn't just go on a spending spree, right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
had to account for how it was used.
Right. The ARPA fund is a separate bucket specifically for those federal dollars.
Yep.
The report breaks down how Bangor used it.
Okay.
Some went to replace lost revenue, some funded public health initiatives, and some went towards infrastructure projects.
It's like getting a bonus at work.
Yeah.
You might be tempted to splurge, but it's probably smarter to pay off some debt, put some in savings, and maybe treat yourself a little.
That's a great analogy.
That's
Now we've gotten a glimpse into these different funds. But how do we know if Bangor is managing them well? How can we assess the overall health of their finances?
Yeah, it's one thing to have different accounts, but are they keeping them balanced? Are they living within their means?
That's the key question, and the report gives us some tools to figure that out.
Okay.
One important indicator is the fund balance.
Okay.
Think of it like checking your bank balance.
Mhm.
Do you have more assets than liabilities?
Okay, so a positive balance means they have more money coming in than going out.
Yes,
That's a good thing.
exactly. It means they have a cushion to absorb unexpected expenses or drops in revenue.
That makes sense.
The report shows that Bangor's governmental funds have a combined fund balance of over $43.7 million.
Wow.
That's a pretty healthy cushion.
So they're not just squeaking by, they've got some breathing room.
Yeah.
But a healthy balance is just one piece of the puzzle, right? What else should we be looking at?
Well, we also need to consider the trends in their revenues and expenses.
Okay.
Are revenues growing over time? Are they keeping expenses under control? These trends can tell us a lot about a city's long-term financial outlook.
It's like tracking your income and spending over time.
Right.
Are you making more money? Are your expenses going up faster than your income?
Exactly.
It's a good way to spot potential problems before they get too big.
The report actually provides a detailed breakdown of Bangor's revenues and expenses over the past 10 years.
Wow.
We can see that their revenues have been fairly stable with some fluctuations due to economic conditions, and their expenses have been generally well managed.
Okay, so they're bringing in enough money,
Mm.
they're not spending recklessly, and they have a healthy savings account.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to consider?
One more thing. Their debt.
Debt.
Just like individuals can take on too much debt, cities can too.
Sure.
We need to look at how much debt Bangor has outstanding and how much of their budget is going towards paying it off. It's like checking your credit card statements.
Oh, yeah.
You want to make sure those payments aren't eating up your whole paycheck.
High debt can be a warning sign. But it also depends on what that debt is used for, right?
Of course.
It's one thing to be in debt for a fancy car. It's another to be in debt for a house or an education.
Exactly. The report provides a detailed breakdown of Bangor's outstanding debt. And it shows that most of it is for things like infrastructure improvements and capital projects.
So good debt.
This is considered good debt because those investments are expected to generate benefits for the city over the long term.
And they're not drowning in debt either. The report shows that their debt service, the money they spend each year paying off that debt, represents a reasonable percentage of their overall budget.
Yes,
It's like having a manageable mortgage, not one that keeps you up at night.
that's a great way to put it. So we've looked at their funds,
Yeah.
their balances, their spending trends, and their debt. What's the verdict? Is Bangor financially sound?
Well, based on everything we've seen so far, it seems like Bangor is in a pretty solid financial position. They're managing their money carefully, making strategic investments, and they're not overextending themselves,
But it's important to remember this is just a snapshot in time.
right?
Things can change quickly, especially in the world of finance.
Oh, yeah.
So you, the listener, should stay informed and continue monitoring Bangor's financial performance if you're interested.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've unpacked the essential services, looked at those different funds, and gotten a good sense of how Bangor is managing their money. What's next? Are we finally ready to hit the golf course?
Not just yet. Remember those business-type activities we talked about in part one? The airport, the golf course, all those ventures?
Yeah.
It's time to explore those in more detail
Okay.
and see how Bangor is leveraging its entrepreneurial side to benefit the city.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's tee off in part 3. Welcome back to our deep dive into Bangor, Maine's financial world.
Right.
We've explored their essential services, how they manage their money, and now it's time to talk about something I'm really curious about.
I am too.
Those business-type activities.
Yes.
Is not every city that runs an airport
No.
a golf course?
Yes.
And a whole bunch of other ventures.
It's true. Bangor's approach is quite unique,
Yeah.
and it really speaks to their entrepreneurial spirit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these business-type activities are designed to be more like standalone businesses, bringing in revenue through fees and charges rather than relying on taxes.
So they're kind of like side hustles for the city, but on a much larger scale.
Exactly.
And if we're talking about scale, let's start with the biggest one, Bangor International Airport.
Okay.
What does the report tell us about this key part of their economy?
Well, the report shows that the airport generated over $26.5 million in operating revenue in fiscal year 2023.
Wow.
That's not pocket change.
No.
It highlights how vital the airport is to Bangor's financial health.
That's a lot of money. And I remember you mentioned earlier that this isn't just about passenger travel. They're a big cargo hub too, right?
Exactly. Bangor International handles goods and freight from all over the world. It's a reminder that airports are complex businesses with multiple revenue streams, and their impact goes way beyond just getting people from point A to point B.
Okay, so they're bringing in over $26 million.
Yeah.
But the report also mentions operating expenses of over $27 million. Wait, does that mean the airport is actually losing money?
It's important to remember that airports require massive investments in infrastructure, equipment, and staff.
Okay.
A slight operating loss isn't necessarily a red flag,
Okay.
especially if they're making smart investments for the future. Think of it like renovating your house. You might spend more now, but it increases the value of your home in the long run.
So it's not about panicking over a small loss. It's about looking at the bigger picture.
Right.
And what those investments might bring. What kind of improvements are they making?
The report shows that the airport fund invested $5.5 million in things like runway and building upgrades, new equipment and vehicles. These aren't just cosmetic changes.
Yeah.
They're investing in safety efficiency and the airport's long-term viability.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They're not cutting corners. They're making sure the airport remains a valuable asset for the city.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something a little less glamorous,
Right.
but equally important. The sewer utility.
Yes. The unsung hero of city life.
Yeah.
We often take it for granted, but a reliable sewer system is crucial for public health and environmental protection.
And the report shows that Bangor takes this responsibility seriously.
They do.
They generated over $9.3 million in operating revenue from the sewer utility, mostly from user fees.
Right. And just like with the airport, they're reinvesting a portion of that revenue back into the system.
Okay.
The report highlights $1.6 million in upgrades to their plant and pump stations,
Wow.
sewer replacements, and other essential projects.
Just like they're constantly tending to the pipes and machinery that keep things flowing smoothly.
Right.
Out of sight, out of mind for most of us, but
Yeah.
without it, well, things could get messy.
Exactly. These investments are essential for maintaining a healthy and sustainable city. And speaking of investments, let's talk about something a bit more recreational. Remember that city-run golf course we talked about?
Oh, yeah. I'm still curious about that. How does a golf course fit into the bigger picture of city finances?
Well, the report shows that the municipal golf course brought in over $852,000 in revenue. It's a modest but steady contributor to those business-type activities.
So it's not just about keeping people entertained. It's generating revenue for the city.
Right.
And it adds to Bangor's appeal as a place to live, right? Who wouldn't want a city-run golf course in their backyard?
It's all about quality of life.
Yeah.
And those business-type activities go beyond just the airport, the sewer utility, and the golf course.
Oh, okay.
Bangor also manages the Bass Park Complex, which hosts harness racing and other events.
Wow.
They operate a stormwater utility and even manage parking for the city.
It's almost like they looked around and said, what can we do to make this city better? And maybe make a little money in the process. It's pretty impressive.
It is. And by having separate financial statements for each of these ventures, we can really see how each one contributes to Bangor's overall financial well-being.
So we've explored the airport, the essential but often overlooked sewer system,
Yes.
even a golf course. What's the main takeaway from all of this?
Bangor isn't just sitting back collecting taxes and hoping for the best. They're actively exploring different ways to generate revenue, provide services, and improve the city for its residents.
It's a reminder that managing a city's finances is about more than just balancing the books.
Right.
It's about finding creative solutions, thinking long-term,
Yeah.
and making investments that benefit the entire community.
Exactly. And remember, this deep dive has only scratched the surface.
Right.
This report is a treasure trove of information.
It is.
And we encourage you, the listener, to explore it further.
Maybe compare Bangor's approach to other cities, see what lessons can be learned, or maybe you're just inspired to book a trip to Bangor. Check out the airport, play around a golf, and see firsthand how this unique approach is shaping a city. Who knows, maybe you'll even find your own entrepreneurial inspiration along the way.
I hope so.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Bangor's financial landscape.